today with his wisdom and guidance on spiritualizing relationships. Swami Harinamananda is a monk from the Ramakrishna order. For those of us who know, most people know Swami Vivekananda, who came first to the United States in 1893 and started spreading the wave of yoga in our country. So he is all of our gurus actually in the United States. And Swami is a monk from that order. He trained in India, in West Bengal, and he will present today the topic, our spiritual cafe. And I think it's on spiritualizing relationships.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Swami. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let's begin with a chant. And this is a Vedic chant. If you know it, please chant along. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Havir Havir Maete Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tena Mam Pahi Nityam Tena Mam Pahi Nityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. O Lord, guide us through and through, and ever protect us with thy loving presence. Om, peace, peace, peace to all beings everywhere.
I don't know if I said, but Swami is from San Diego. So just because some people maybe they thought you came all the way from West Bengal.
Oh, no.
He resides in San Diego.
I just came from our Balboa Park area. In fact, do you guys know what the meaning of San Diego is? Anybody? You guys live in San Diego, you should know the meaning, right? What?
St. James.
St. James?
St. Diego.
St. Diego? Okay. So you know there was a famous Swami, Swami Chinmoyananda. Anybody hear of Swami Chinmoyananda by show of hands? He actually passed away in San Diego. And his devotees passed away in San Diego. They defined San Diego as this. Okay? It is San Diego. San Diego. It's where the ego dies and you become a saint. San Diego. So, you know, there is one place in India itself, it's considered a very sacred and holy space. And it's said that if you pass away in that place, you get what's called mukti, liberation. Does anybody know where that is?
Kasi.
Kashi, Varanasi, Kashi, yes. So they consider San Diego the Kashi of the United States, according to Chinmoyananda. So today we are going to have a spiritual cafe, and what that means is that the idea came, spiritual cafe came from the idea of the death cafe. Mm-hmm. Has anybody ever, you've gone to a death cafe? Anybody else? Okay. So what the death cafe was, and I attended this, and I thought it was a remarkable kind of event. What they do is they talk about death in a setting where they sort of destigmatize it. They give you coffee, they give you tea, they give you snacks, and then you meet in groups of like, say, 5 or 6 people, and you talk about the concept of death. What is it like to have someone who passes away? How do you prepare for someone who's passing away? How do you prepare for your own death? What can you do? They take this very difficult concept and they try to just make it, normalize it as an everyday part of life. And so you're drinking coffee, eating snacks, and you pull up a question and everybody goes around the table to answer that question. And it was a brilliant idea because you get sort of a sharing of all these different backgrounds on the concept and topic of death. So I really love that idea. And what we do and what we did in the San Diego Vedanta Monastery, and we've brought it to what's called the Interreligious Council of San Diego, is we have what's called spiritual cafes. That's to take sometimes difficult concepts and to present them to people with diverse backgrounds, and let us come together and talk about these in an open, safe space, okay? Respecting everybody's opinion. So that's what we're going to do today. Today is not about me lecturing to you on spiritualizing relationships. Today, you're going to be given some questions, and you're going to answer these questions, and we'll have you put into groups. And we're going to sort of randomize these groups, because I find if you're speaking with strangers, it's a lot easier to open up, as opposed to talking about relationship and having your partner there in the same room, or the same group, and then you're a little bit restricted. So we want to keep it as open as possible. So when Carolyn asked me, let's have a spiritual cafe, I thought, okay, well, we've done one on death, but I don't know about the group, that may be too morbid, so let's do something on relationships. So when she asked me this, it was a few weeks ago, and at that time, it was like 4 or 5 years ago, I had done a talk on spiritualizing relationships. And then I told Carolyn, I haven't done this in a long time, so things are not in my memory. Right now I'm focusing on Indian mythology. This has got my interest right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to work together to discover and uncover what is a spiritual relationship. And in order to understand what a spiritual relationship is, we're going to have to know what is a healthy relationship. In order to understand what a healthy relationship, we need to compare it to an unhealthy relationship. Okay? And I think most everyone, in fact, I guarantee every one of us has been in relationships. And so we're going to share from our own experience today of what these relationships are like, by trying to understand what is an unhealthy, healthy, and spiritual relationship. When I was, it was a few years ago, 3 years ago, there was this, I teach at the Vedanta Monastery, and we have a lot of Indians, especially a lot of young Indian boys. They come here, they get their graduate degree, and then they're working in a company, and then sooner or later some of them go back to India. So this one boy was going back to India, and I asked him, what's going to happen? And he says, Maharaj, Swami, I'm going to be getting married. I'm going to be getting married. It's an arranged marriage. Okay, his parents pick out his wife, and he's going to show up for the wedding, right? and you know the idea behind an Indian wedding? The idea behind an Indian wedding is that when you meet the person, my parents had an arranged marriage, where my father just saw the photograph of my mother, and he was a student, and he was a professor here, and then he went back to India, and then he just met her for the first time in the marriage itself, the marriage ceremony. So the idea is that you're not in love at the time you're meeting the person, okay? The idea is that you grow to love. So the marriage is that love is never, it's not a noun, it's always a verb. You're always learning to love. So the whole relationship, the whole time you're married, the whole process is learning to love this person. Not that I'm ever in love. It's quite different from the mythology that we grew up in the West, where we say, I found the person. I'm in love, okay? And it just sounds like once you're in love, the only thing that can happen is you go downhill out of love. So it's a little bit of a different way or approach to that lifetime commitment that we think of. So, so he ended up telling me, he goes, Swami, you know what? There are 3 rings in every relationship. I said, really? What are the 3 rings? And he said, well, there's going to be the engagement ring, then there's going to be the wedding ring, and then he said, after some time my friends have told me the 3rd ring. What's the 3rd ring? Boring. Okay? he comes back 3 years later. He goes, Swami, I forgot. There was a fourth ring. So what's the fourth ring? Anybody know?
Adoring.
No, that's
Adoring.
that's a healthy relationship. Suffering.
Adoring
So-
there. It's always wrong.
Are you single?
And this, maybe some of us can relate to this, all right? And for me, the reason, it was interesting for me, why I started going into discovering about spiritual relationships, I think it was, I've been in the monastery since I joined really young, 1997. And I was really inspired by a monk. His name was Swami Shraddhananda. He was up in Sacramento. And I was going to college, I was going up to UC Davis at that time, and I was sort of exploring what's the meaning of life. And for me, I had this void in my heart. And you know, most of my friends were, I was pre-med, and and so they were pre-med, and you know, going to medical school, and my dad is a professor in the medical school, but that just didn't seem to resonate with me. And then, being in a relationship, it still felt that whoever was in your heart, it just felt that there's still like a void. The person would be there, but it felt like they'd be going in quicksand, and that void would still be there. So that still wasn't filling my heart. I met a person, he was an old Swami, he was about 87 years old, Swami Shraddhananda. And when I met him, it was just like, I felt that in his presence, all the problems that I had just were not solved, but they were dissolved. Being in his presence, I just felt this euphoria of peace, of love, of unconditional love. I felt that there was nothing that he wanted from me, but he just wanted to give, to share, but he didn't want anything in return. There was something that he was connected into, that he was full, purna, we call it in Sanskrit, purnatva. He was filled, and through this fullness, he was able to give without wanting anything back. And the other thing I noticed about him, I was just kind of like watching things at the time. I was very observant. I used to go work out in the gym very steadily every day. And I'd see, one time I was very observant, I saw I was upstairs doing the cardio stairmasters, and you see a beautiful woman walking by. And then you see that there's this young fraternity guy doing the weights. All of a sudden he stopped, and he just froze. And he just started watching her. And then she kept walking, and then I noticed that there's an old man, also about 85 years old. He was also working the weights, and all of a sudden she came by, and all of a sudden he stopped. And he just like froze, and he was also looking. And I was like, wow, am I going to be like this at 85? Where there's always going to be desires that's going to be sort of ruling my life? Is this what's going to be happening to me? So it was through this Swami that I wanted what he had. And that's how I sort of came into spiritual life. So today, what I want to do is, I was saying, I'm going to give you some questions. And you're going to break up into groups. But before we break up there, I want to talk a little bit about, as a group, what do we think, what do we mean by relationships here? What is an unhealthy relationship? What is a healthy relationship? And what's a spiritual relationship? All right? And let me just give you sort of a model to work with, at least something that we can think about maybe. This was told to me by one Swami, that if we think of ourselves as, let's just call this circle as I, and normally we think of relationships are with other humans, and so when we think of healthy and unhealthy, we think of our relationships with other humans. There's also relationships that we have with nature. And let's just say nature being all others, animals, plants, everything other than humans. So normally we think of healthy and unhealthy relationships as our interactions with other humans. He told me that when we think of spiritual relationship, by definition, spirituality has the word spirit. So it's a relationship with spirit. our relationship with the divine, our relationship with, let's say, our higher self, however you want to think of that as. Let's just call that our capital S, our higher self. And this is known as our kind of like our lower self. This is us here. So the idea we're going to be looking into, and I want you to think about, is that when we talk about relationships again, you're going to see that unhealthy, healthy is in reference to other beings. So spiritual relationship is going to be in reference to what? To the divine, to our higher self, to our, if we don't take alone God, to the self that our highest potential, okay, let alone the word the divine here. So how does, we're going to be looking then, today we have to be thinking along these lines, how does our relationship with other human beings helps us to manifest our highest true potential, or connect us with our higher self, or connect us with the divine? And vice versa, how does our relationship with the divine help us in our relationship with others? Right? That's what we're going to be thinking about today in those lines. So, before we get to that, let us deal with something that all of us have some experience with. And what we're going to do is talk about a little bit about what are unhealthy relationships, what are healthy relationships, and we're going to look a little bit about what are spiritual relationships before we get you in these groups there. So, to start off, to me, an unhealthy relationship is where one is very focused on their own selves. It's by nature, I define it as a very selfish relationship. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
I mean, basically, there's only room for me and not room for anybody else. So how can I have a relationship with others when, everything is completely about me, myself, and I? And in that respect, how would I see other people? Okay? There's no room for you. It's all about me. So when we look at an unhealthy relationship from our own experiences, what are some of the things that you would say? How do you describe an unhealthy relationship? What are some of the indicators of an unhealthy relationship?
Like when there's an unbalance, like let's say there's not enough balance between giving and receiving. Like if it's mostly giving from one side and the other one is just receiving,
Right.
it's just the balance is gonna go.
Right. So that's true. And in that sense also, I think that sometimes if a person is keeping accounts, of what I've done and what you haven't done.
Right.
So that to me is an indicator of an unhealthy relationship. And before I go on, I want to let all of us we're going to fit into all of these categories. There's no one that's going to be perfectly spiritual, no one's going to be perfectly healthy, no one's going to be perfectly unhealthy. We're going to find that we have a mixture. So today what we're going to do is we're going to increase our awareness of what is unhealthy, what is healthy, and we're going to start to expand our definition because we're approaching things from our own viewpoint, all right? From the stories and the mythologies that we've grown up with, the things that from people who grew up with Cinderella and saying, find your Prince Charming and live life ever happily ever after, Or is there such thing as you find your perfect soulmate, all right? So we're going to just start exploring some of these myths, and is it true? And just question for ourselves. Right? So going back to unhealthy relationships, what is self? Come on, guys. You guys have all been in unhealthy relationships. So what are some indicators? Go ahead.
I'll try to limit it to one.
Yeah.
Codependency.
Codependency. Now, let's think about that.
Like overly.
So then I would say not codependency, I would say dependency.
Yeah.
When you become dependent on another person. There's in the Upanishads, it's in the Hindu scriptures, there's the Kena Upanishads, one of the scriptures of the realized rishis and saints, and in one of them they say that by whose light does everything shine? By whose light does everything shine? And is it by your light? I mean, they take it back to what is illumining the way you experience things? Is it your body illuminating? What's illuminating your body? They'll say your mind is illuminating that. Then behind your prana, behind your mind, ultimately you get back to this pure consciousness, pure self. That is which is illuminating everything. But in this reference, when you say dependence, by whose light are you shining? Are you shining by your spouse's light? Do you define yourself by their light, by their accomplishments? Does that sound like an unhealthy relationship? Okay. So yes, dependency is another one here. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, come on, you must know something. Just search deeper.
When someone wants to control or dominate a person through maybe, could be through abuse, verbal, physical, it seems like an unhealthy relationship.
Right. So control. And the opposite of control would be freedom. Yes. Okay. So that's good. Yes. Exactly. Anybody else? You had your hand up.
Well, if one person can never live up to the expectations of the other, so it's an unhealthy person that doesn't have a sense of self, and the other person is insecure, and so they I don't know, it's hard to explain.
Expectations?
No, but I had a friend, I'll tell you honestly, that he got
I've seen
married.
that.
His spouse had this image of him, and that what he was supposed to be like. And it was very difficult because he was trying to live up to that image.
Right.
And eventually he crashed and burned.
Right.
Because why? He wasn't his authentic self. So you're right also. So it's unrealistic expectations that we have. It's true, very true. Anybody else? Yes.
Taking the liberty to speak in a way that hurts other people, people who are habitually angry or negative, or however, they use that to, they take liberties with how they speak.
So sometimes it's kind of like belittling that person.
Yeah, all sorts of things.
Right.
Hurtful,
Disrespect.
disrespectful,
Disrespect, sort of make them feel inferior.
bad, stupid, anything.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yes, so, yeah, very good. So again, it goes back to the imbalance. Yes.
You might have said already, but blaming the other person for making me unhappy. Like, you did
Yes.
that and I'm unhappy. You did that and now that makes me happy.
Right,
I'm pointing the finger. It's their fault. Not
right,
mine.
right. That's the blame game. Right. So never taking responsibility, in other words. Yes, that's really true. Anybody else?
I would think one in which the people's world or universe gets smaller rather than expansive.
Right. So I think I call that sort of a very contracted sense of self-identity, contracted self. So the idea that this is what I am. I have these limited boundaries, and this is what I sort of hold on to. And you have to fit within those boundaries, maybe. So yeah, but a limited way of thinking. It's true. There's one Swami Vivekananda, Carolyn was mentioning, said expansion is life, contraction is death. So good. And another last one. Let's go one last point on this one.
Neglect.
Neglect. Okay. Neglect. Good. Okay. Let's go on then to let me. I'm gonna give it a little Eastern twist to this. How this fits into the Eastern philosophy. Usually in an unhealthy relationship, why is this occurring? Is because the person has so much baggage that the light within them is so colored from so much of past, previous, we call karma, previous baggage, that they can't experience their own light of luminosity. So there's it's what we call tamas. It's a tamasic way of living. It's tamas in our Indian language refers to inertia. It's you're filled with so much baggage. Everything is heavy, and you're stagnated. So you don't want things to move. And when you don't want to move, you also don't want anybody else to move around you. You want to keep things as they are. Okay? So let's go on to healthy relationship, because I want to, actually it's you guys to get together and talk. Give me some indicators of what a healthy relationship is.
Supportive.
Supportive.
Of what each person wants to be, and supportive of each person's authentic self.
So let me start. To me, we define, sometimes I thought this unhealthy relationship is someone who's very selfish.
Mm-hmm.
I would say someone who's a healthy relationship is someone who's centered. Okay?
Yeah.
Right. So supportive of not only themselves, but supportive of their partners as well, of everyone they meet. They're enthusiastic for others, and they share in their success. Good. Anybody else? Yes.
When you're still growing as an individual, and then also growing together.
When you're growing as an that's good, and that's going to also, I think, play into a spiritual relationship as well. That's good, but I would say a healthy relationship is really where two people, the goal is to getting along with each other, okay? And so yes, so I think it's when two people are sort of growing together. So the concept for me, I find, starts to go blend into this we concept of this supportiveness here. Yes.
Appreciation of the other
Appreciation.
person, you know, that's kind of in line with everything else.
Right.
Or acceptance, that's.
Right. Yes, Amar?
Being willing to listen to your partner when they're sharing, and then being willing to share from your heart to them, like opening up so they can see you, and you're available to listen to them when their time of sharing.
Right. It's a really good point. I think what he's saying is to be present. To be present with the person when they're sharing and opening up with you, and then also to reciprocate as well. That's a hard thing to do, by the way, because a lot of us, even us Swamis, when people are talking to us, you'll find that they want to open up and they're telling us they have a question. Already, before they get finished with their question, I have a loaded answer that's willing to come out. So when we meet in these groups, that's another thing. We're going to learn to just be patient, allow the person to speak until they're done, and then we say, to be completely open, receptive, and listen. Really, for the first time, just to pay attention and listen. And how do you listen? Only if you're curious about what the other has to share. So you have to be, the question, what is it that I can learn from you? What is it what you're trying to express? Because you value their opinion. That comes back to, but respect. Respect would be another thing in a healthy relationship. Okay? Let's just get a couple more. You have your hand up.
Open communication thing.
Open communication. Right. Very good. There's I can't remember, Marshall Rosenberg, was that who talks about what's the book? There's a famous book?
Nonviolent communication.
Huh?
Is it the nonviolent?
Nonviolent communication. And he talks about how to, I can't remember, does anybody remember the tools, how like,
The jackal and the giraffe.
the jackal and giraffe, and how like, instead of talking about like, this is what you did, or this is what you're doing to me, you put it from a first person. This is how I feel. I feel in this point that I feel, when we go to a party and you go off and talk to other people, I feel lonely. I feel abandoned. Putting it in the first person to take responsibility for that, as opposed to always blaming the other person. Okay? That's much more. Okay, one more.
Vulnerability. So when
Vulnerability.
we get triggered, that we actually can stay in with vulnerability, and also when the other one gets triggered, that we can hold space or be kind when they're in a very vulnerable state.
Right.
'Cause otherwise it's
Being detached, being witness, as she's talking, Julia, right? Yukta, I'm sorry, Yukta. As how that's really going to blend into, I think, to this spiritual relationship. Okay, anything else?
With vulnerability, safe, there's a safe feeling there.
Right. So that trust, I like trust, safe. So I think, and to me, then this also means, remember what I told you about the Swami when I first came? That really saintly Swami. One of the things I liked about him was I felt I could open up to him. For what reason? Because I felt he wouldn't judge me. I mean, my parents, I find the limitations of what I could tell when I was growing up, what I could tell my parents, and what I can't tell my parents. I find the limitations of what I could tell others because everybody has their own triggers, and they're going to step in and put their opinion. I wanted some place where I can empty myself into completely and just release. Where is that place? Who can provide that space? So this one Swami used to tell me, this is actually spiritual, said, you know what? As monastics, how we can serve others, says sometimes we can't really give spiritual instructions because sometimes those are very difficult things. And what you can do is you can learn to listen to another person with love and complete attention. And if you learn to listen with love and attention, what are you going to do? You're going to allow that person to empty themselves. Because all this, sometimes emotional toxicity has accumulated within us, and we want to release it someplace. Where can we release it to? Where is the safe place? So if you can develop that type of relationship, it's a wonderful relationship to be with. And maybe we can talk in the end what are some of the techniques, or how maybe you can share how you've learned to do that. So let's see. So a healthy relation. Let me just give you some other points here that was said in a psychology magazine. You think your partner has good ideas. They're enthusiastic for what you do. They share something positive before they say something negative. You're comfortable about the things that make you feel vulnerable, such as worries about getting laid off. There's a sense of security, and you have admiration for each other, and you have fun together. So that is a healthy relationship. Let's just briefly go spiritual relationship, then we're going to throw out some questions to you guys. What are some qualities that you find? What do you think? Just what is spiritual relationship?
Forgiveness.
What's that?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Okay. Forgiveness. Anything else? What is something you think when you think about spiritual relationship? What do you think?
Set the other person free.
Setting the other person free. Okay. So complete freedom. Let me throw something out at you. Do you think that in a healthy relationship, the focus is on each other and how to develop a good relationship? So open communication with acceptance, appreciation, affection. There's these 4 A's. But in a spiritual relationship, do you think that maybe that the goal is not so much each other, but is there a higher goal? And that both people, that you both share this approach to that higher goal. Does that sound like a spiritual relationship?
Maybe harmony might be a word where you're kind of higher to me if you're in harmony.
Sure.
It's like uplifting and.
Absolutely. I think and that hits the center when we talked about remember we talked about divine, and we talked about I, and we talked about humans. Well, sometimes to get in harmony means by doing your spiritual practices or your yoga exercises, you start to go more towards reaching more towards your a higher self. You get out of your egoic self, your own self-image. You move away from that, and then you can start to see yourself from non-judgmental eyes, from a loving kindness. You start to become more a witness to who you are. And as a witness, as someone who could see, you're here, I'm here, my partner's here, other people's here, I sort of transcend that level, and then I can objectively see what is happening. Instead of being in the situation and trying to solve the problem at the same level, you have to transcend. You have to step back a few steps to be able to see everything from an objective point of view. And I think that's what happens. You'll find as you do your practices that you start to become detached from this image we think we are to something higher, to something greater. And then from that perspective, you start to see things in a much more, we'd say, without the baggage that's coloring your mind. Every time some people come in our shrine and based on what they've done to me, like say last week or last year, I hold on to those memories. Like, oh, that person, oh, Carolyn's here, oh, she's a really nice one, okay, I should go say hi to her. Oh, that person's there, okay, I'm going to move away from that person. You find that in the Yoga Sutras, we tend to move towards something, which is called raga, with attraction, or we move away from things based on fear. So, yes, what you said. Okay, anybody else?
Compassion.
Compassion, yes. Compassion, yes. And not only compassion for your partners, but also compassion for yourself as well?
Seeing the other person as yourself, rather than somebody separate, that it's really a reflection, whatever's coming up in this person is a reflection of me.
Right.
If I can have the awareness.
Right.
To see that.
That's, there was we talk about relationships, you think like, who's this person to speak about relationships? He's a monk. It's true. But I lived in a monastery where there were about 15 other monks with us, okay? And we lived in a cloistered monastery. And you start to see, it's like you have one partner, think about having 15 partners, okay? And it's not always easy. So what you start to see that ultimately, when I was going from different monasteries, I've been to different monasteries, from one monastery to another monastery, when the same problems keep coming up with different people, you finally start to say, it's not them.
Yeah.
It's me. They're mirrors or reflections of things that I have within me. For me to see anger in that person and judge a person based on what I'm thinking they are, means I have that within me. So a spiritual relationship is about cleansing your own mirror, so that as you cleanse this, you'll start to see that your own relationships also become more cleansed. Some other people had some hands up here?
Since you mentioned the Yoga Sutras, having the yamas and the niyamas as the foundation of the relationship, and looking to the finer levels.
Right.
Because they're always there, right?
Yes.
Because we always interact.
Yes. So the yamas and niyamas, yes. The yamas and basing your relationship on having a foundation. And that to me is also, if we have a shared common goal where we're both leading this foundation. And I think also, spiritual relation, I'll give you an honest, my father and mother are very good devotees in our center. And they're sort of looked upon as a couple who has a real solid spiritual relationship. And what I've seen in their relationship is that they support each other, that they help each other towards this higher ideals. So I've noticed like my mom will get up sort of like 4:30 in the morning, and then she'll get my father up to meditate together. And then they'll find that they'll go to these lectures together. They support each other in their higher ideals. And when one person's not feeling good, it's like they try to encourage that other person to do those activities which are uplifting. So that's another thing about a spiritual relationship, where you support each other, uplift each other towards a higher goal. Okay? Anybody else? Yes, last one.
For me, the idea of the spiritual relationship would be, instead of two people being about each other, looking at each other, that both people are turned towards, let's say, God or whatever so they're not us.
Right.
Us.
Another person, he was a Christian monk, described it as like, you have person A, person B. The goal, let's say, is the divine. And as you move towards the divine, what starts to happen? The relationship between the couples gets closer together. As you grow, you start to see that person not only in the physical sense, not only do you see them in the emotional sense, you start to see the spiritual qualities that resonate within that person, the truth, the love, and that's what you start to be captivated by. But that only happens is if you change yourself. So the more you change, the more you can see the dimensions of that other person also start to open up, change. Okay? So right now, what I'd love to do now is get you guys into groups, and I want you, before you get into groups, I have some questions. And I'm going to ask, just if we can just pass these around really quick.
Swami, how come we didn't put love up there?
Oh, yeah, no one mentioned it, you're right. So,
Forgot that one.
so yes. Love, as we talk about.
Without condition.
Absolutely, unconditional love. Remember that is the basis. And remember, unconditional love can only happen only if you're plugged into something higher. So the more you're plugged into the higher source, where you're tapping into that, that is giving you your love. That is giving your fullness. You know, we talk about why we're in relationships. Ultimately, sometimes in every kind of mythology, whether it's Eastern or Western, you'll find that we were perfect, we were pure. And then all of a sudden there's some separation that occurs. Then we become individualized, all right? And so we feel lacking. So the whole job in the East is how to get that fullness back. So the journey through whatever practices through life is to feel that fullness once again. In Christian mythology, they talk about Adam and Eve, and they were there and then with God, and then Eve ate the apple of knowledge. From the East, we would say the apple of duality. When they were one and perfect, all of a sudden, duality opened up, like good and bad, right and wrong. And now the job is how to return back to this pure heaven, if you want to call it, how to return back to the original source. Okay? And so relationships can be used as a vehicle to get us back to that source. In one way, they can be training wheels to help us to ultimately to connect with that source where we feel full, where we're connected to something greater, something higher. But relationships can be used as a vehicle to help us get there. All right? So does everybody have a copy of this? All right. So just quickly, these are thinking questions. These were developed not only by me, but I had a couple other monks come in and help me. All right? So first question is, based on your experiences and observations, how would you know your relationship with others is healthy? To what extent are you able to make that assessment? Again, when I say to what extent, meaning, how do you know you're in a healthy relationship? Who's been your models? Were it your parents? Was it the stories that you grew up with? We've all grown up with stories, like the Cinderella story, the Aladdin story. So where do you find, how can you make that assessment about your relationship? Does your view of the relationship coincide with that of the other person in the relationship? Does what you feel in this relationship, does that coincide with what they think as well? So, this is something to think about. Usually we know what's right for us, but is it also matching what they think? The second question, think of a close relationship that you have. For example, a partner, spouse, parent, sibling, child, friend. How does it help you to grow and evolve towards your spiritual goals, towards your full potential? The last question is, how does your yoga or spiritual practices help you in transforming or improving your relationships? Do they work for you only, or do their effects extend to others? Do you find that by doing your exercises, your spiritual practices, your yoga, you are feeling peace, you're feeling calmness? But what about the other person? Do you find that it's also affecting them in a way as well? And then what are those practices? What are the practices that help you in maintaining a good relationship? So the idea is, here we're going to take about 10 minutes, and each one of you just, right now, you can just answer those questions, and then we're going to meet, then you're gonna go in groups. And you're gonna go in these groups, and we'll have, say, like 5 in a group, and you'll go around answering these questions, all right? And basically, the idea is everybody will have 2 minutes to answer each question. You just go around the room and answer the question, then someone will write up the answers. We need someone who's gonna be a group report, just summarize the basic points, and then at the end present these points to everybody. Is that understood?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'll do is, does everybody have a pen or pencil? I have some also here. Is that across these questions?
Yeah, are you gonna read the question, or?
Well,
It's gonna be kind of a hard.
okay, that's fine. So I think everybody knows question number 1. So based on your experiences and observations, how would you know your relationships with others is healthy? To what extent are you able to make that assessment? And does your view of the relationship coincide with that of the other person in the relationship? So what we'll do is we'll just go question by question, and then the next question.
You'll have to figure out which part of the question this is answering.
That's fine. Just give a little summary of that.
Based on how you both feel and how you're responding, how the other person feels, a sense of ease and joy and being yourself, and laughter and empathy, based on how each acts and responds, both being seen and heard and centered, and view the relationship most of the time. But you want a dynamic relationship, you want solidarity. You can tell by the body language and by active listening. And some of us said, some said, it doesn't always coincide because you're human. You know?
Yeah.
So how do you know if it's always, we felt that some of us, it's easier with some relationships, I think. So depending on the level of the, that's what we have.
Okay. Okay, and when I think, when we said, does your view of the relationship coincide with that of the other person, this was a question that was thrown in by one of the monks, is that sometimes we think this is right, but how do we feel what the other person thinks? Are they also registering the same thing that we're viewing in this relationship? Okay, that was the idea behind this, does it coincide?
Okay.
So let's go with you guys. It's the same question, okay?
Yeah. Feelings of happiness, love, affection. Do I feel better with them than without them? Can I better negotiate other parts of my life? Being able to receive feedback from the other person, personal feelings, and the other person's response to me. Feeling at ease in the person's presence, the level of trust I have with that person and that person has with me. Can I be my authentic self with that person and vice versa? Feeling in my gut a sense of joy and life versus feeling withdrawn.
Wonderful. So to me, the common denominator that was coming up was, am I growing in this relationship? Or the opposite would be, is this relationship stifling me? So I think, to me, I love what Swami Vivekananda said, expansion is life, contraction is death. Anytime we put limitations. So thank you so much. You guys.
Mutual respect and forgiveness, enjoyment and caring, showing up no matter what happens, to be there no matter what happens. And regarding the last one, does your view of the relationship coincide? Sometimes you have to ask the question.
Yes.
And then how often is there, is it good and how often is it bad? And sometimes you just need to step away and evaluate that.
The one that came up to me that was that commitment. You said something like, how committed are, what's that?
Showing up whether it's good or bad,
Right.
committed, yes.
So that's in a healthy relationship, you'll find, we're going to try to work through this. So there is things that we find sometimes digging up the dirt. We can dig up the dirt, but when we dig up that dirt, are we gonna work through that? Are we gonna, in any type of spiritual or healthy relationship, it's always something you're growing, you're in a positive way. So that also, through that commitment. So, good, very good. And
Excuse me, I have to just interrupt for a second.
yes,
Someone's blocking her, a soldier, what kind of car?
It's a Lexus GSF, long car.
Thank you, sorry to interrupt.
no, you guys?
So we talked about healthy relationships have a give and take, and that when there are problems or misunderstandings, that there are resolutions to them. They don't continue over time. That there's a big emotional response to whether it's good or bad. So that we all agree that there's joy, laughter, kind of upliftedness, and that there was a lot of mention about time in our group, both like sustaining relationships over time and wanting to spend time with the person. So kind of that idea. And one person even said, it's been helpful to be in unhealthy relationships because it's helped me to see what is really, truly healthy in a relationship.
Can we use unhealthy relationships as a way to grow?
Yes.
In what ways? How do they help us grow?
Don't repeat the same mistakes.
Learn from your mistakes. So I mean, in a spiritual relationship, they would see things that happen, things that are difficult times, as obstacles, as opportunities, right? So to work through opportunities, you still need commitment, and you need something positive that you're growing towards. So yes, so it's good. Thank you so much. And we have one last group, you guys here.
Group 5, everybody said what we said.
Okay.
But, of course, by the time the first one went. I wanted to touch on again, someone in the group said what your energy level is like when you're with that person. I would add to that, like, your energy level should be good, but it doesn't mean that maybe even if you disagreed about something, your energy level could still be good because you could respect each other's places that they were coming from and your differences. And I think maybe also someone touched on too before is if you're really comfortable being yourself, you can be your honest, authentic self with that person.
There's one Swami, Harinamananda, he's from SRF, he talked about energy. He said, if you want to spiritualize a relationship, remember that all spiritual consciousness is high energy, not low energy. So being spiritual in your relations with other people means you give them your energy wholeheartedly. So you're just pour, but again, remember, where's that energy ultimately coming from? From your higher self. So in a healthy relationship, you're dependent on a person, up to a certain point, but then when you get to a spiritual relationship, are you still dependent on them? Or do you start to depend on something else for your source of joy, for your source of energy? It's a question we can think of. Since you guys went, you guys go first for the next question, number 2.
So they don't steal my answers? Our answers, sorry about that. Do you want to read the question again?
So the question is, think of a close relationship that you have. For example, partner, spouse, parent, sibling, child, friend. How does it help you to grow and evolve towards your spiritual goals of full potential?
Okay. So some of the answers were, it helps you grow because of the support and the freedom and non-judgmentalness. Friends who encourage self-expression and independence. Constantly surrounding, here goes my handwriting. Surrendering. Dropping expectations. Don't let the past color your relationships. Letting go of how I think things should be. Togetherness. Learning from someone who's very different and difficult. and to respect each other's differences and their individuality.
Wonderful. She used one term for the first time that we haven't used, I think, previously, surrendering. How does the concept of surrendering play into the role of a relationship here?
We can't control everything.
We can't control
Yeah,
everything.
no kidding.
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate, and we're just, I don't know the answers, I'm just asking the questions, because we're all limited beings from our own perspective, but surrendering in this type of relationship, some people would say, you know what, I can feel like a doormat,
Right.
that they're always stepping on me. I'm doing everything and eventually I'm going to break. So where does surrendering come here? What does surrendering mean? Yes.
I mean, it could also be from the context of acceptance, that it's not just giving up, but like accepting and like giving in with like the person.
So accepting them for who they are and then working with that? That's true. I mean, I see with my parents, I start to discover their boundaries, what I can, like I said, what they can handle and what they can't handle. So based on that, then I was able to better relate with them.
Yeah.
It's true. Yes.
Well, I said it, and so when I said it, I was thinking about my relationship with my daughter, and it has to do with just, again, letting things be the way that they are, not having the relationship look like I think it should be, and not bringing the past into it, but just like, this is how they are right now, doesn't mean that's how they're going to be in the future, doesn't mean it's good or bad, doesn't mean, so it's surrendering the ego.
Right. Good point. Thank you.
And then I think it's also important to see that you don't become a doormat. What do I surrender to? Is it Sthiti Tamasic? Is it Rajasic or Sattvic? And then in what kind of levels it starts hurting me? So that the surrendering comes from knowing who I am and not taking it personally. But if it's really Tamasic and very violent and I get hurt, then I don't think that this is hurt beyond the ego, just where it's not safe, and just really knowing from what place the surrendering comes from.
It's a very good point. I think what she's saying here is this, that surrendering has different meanings. So in a unhealthy relationship, who are you surrendering to? You're not going to be surrendering to your partner if he's keeping you in an abusive, or he or she's keeping you in an abusive relationship. So one of the things sometimes in spiritual life they talk about is you have to let go of the ego. That's, I think, is a misnomer. It's not about letting go of the ego, it's about maturing the ego. So you have to go from someone who's at low self-esteem to develop an ego of self-worth, of high self-esteem. You have to establish yourself, know yourself. And then as you get to this point, your ego starts to expand where it's like a ripe fruit, it just drops off, and you surrender to that, which is your higher self, okay, not your egoic self. But you do, if you're in a tamasic relationship, if you're in an unhealthy relationship, you have to develop yourself. So it's not surrendering to that. It's in other words, you're trying to surrender to your higher self in this sense. Okay. So you guys.
Okay. It pushes me to be more self-reflective. I feel supported, I have fun. We talked about motherhood and how you lose your sense of yourself because it is no longer the me, it's the we, right? And that it's not that you're not growing anymore, but you're growing together.
Right.
And I have an image I shared with the group of like, when I have a spiritual connection with somebody, it's like our spirits, like the water quality of our spirit kind of comes together, so that I kind of feel what they're feeling, and I have this, an intuition about them that I might not feel with a stranger, but it tends to spread to strangers.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I can start connecting with people in that way too.
There was a couple that used to get in fights all the time, and there's a senior Swami in Portland, and so they were like, what do we do? We're always fighting. What the Swami told them was that as soon as like you feel the sense of this, that you've been, that a trigger has come up within you, instead of engaging, you need to take a time out. How do you take a time out? Well, they had a shrine in their, like a sort of meditation room or a yoga room. So what they would do was, as soon as they felt the sense of sort of like a disagreement starting to come up, the agreement was they go sit in that shrine, so sit in that meditation space, sit there for at least 5 minutes, present the problem to that higher source, and then see what comes up. And then after 5 minutes, talk from there. So it's really about realizing that how can I, because it's our ego that comes into play when we feel threatened and then we want to react. How can we, instead of reacting, instead respond with awareness? We need to take a time out. We need to break that chain before we get lost into our normal reaction state. So how can we do that? You guys are next.
Oh, we're next.
Oh wait, you guys, I'm sorry.
So we talked about 3 different kinds of relationships, parents and child.
Yes.
From the parent point of view, parent and child, from the child's point of view, and the teacher-student relationship. So with the teacher-student relation, that's an important relationship and helps you to grow. From the parent-child relationship, it just expands what you can accept, and you give without expectations from your children. And then you make an effort. You make more of it with your child. You make more of an effort to make it work because they're your child. From the other side, where the child having a relationship with the parent, you have a tendency as the child to not get along so much with your parents, maybe. And then as you mature, you learn to say, okay, what is their point of view? And if I can understand that, then I can understand before judging whether or not my parents are right or wrong.
Wonderful. It's a really hard one, how to put yourself in their shoes. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. I really like this. The trick, the hard one, you said, is giving without expectation. That is it's a challenge. I don't know. Does anybody know anybody who does that? That's a tough one. Santa. I think Santa has expectations too, though. The cookies and milk.
Cookies and milk.
You guys, you're next.
Okay. Strife with the other person leads to self-inquiry. You can also ask input. Sharing, you are able to share experiences and support. That relationship also is inspirational and motivational. It can also give people courage to do what they want and need to do, what they should do. It leads to personal self-growth, spiritually waking up with each other, and mutually supported. And deep love allows people the support they need for change.
That's a good one, right?
Okay.
You guys.
Let's see. If how has the relationship helped me grow? If the person makes me question myself in the relationship, and I'm trying to expand and improve myself, and if I learn how to respect the other person's ego, it's kind of more what everyone's been talking about, and about learning to be compassionate to the other person, and active listening again, and then if it causes curiosity. Like you're asking yourself, what are they reflecting back about me? And then growing in the relationship can help me be more in union with God. And then letting go of my fears. And I like this one, getting back to fun and joy. That's a good one. And then it teaches patience, acceptance, and healthy boundaries. And then can we have helps us to have our own values but not expect the same in the other person. So I think most of that's been said.
But the one point I like was, I think, this is a difficult point, challenging. Does the relationship challenge you? Does it help you grow? And in what way? I'll give you an example. So in a monastery, we have teachers, sort of like sometimes you call gurus, or just what we call upa-gurus, people who are our mentors. And sometimes in the Indian tradition, you'll find there's a lot of scolding. They'll shout at you, and they say they're trying to diminish your ego, right? And so they're trying to make you perfect, and in that perfection, they're hollering at you, for perfection. Sometimes you feel that in this hollering that they're just doing it out of their own ego. They're challenging me, but it seems sometimes that you feel that it's because of their own ego. They're having a bad day, so they're putting it out on me. So when do you know someone is doing something to challenge you in this relationship, but it's out of your own vested interest? I mean, what do you feel? What's the difference? I'm asking. I don't know the answer. I'm asking you guys. What do you feel is the difference when someone is challenging you, but it's from their own ego that they're challenging you, as opposed to for your own self-growth? They really have your best interest at heart. Can someone help me with that?
You have to just know that they're human beings and they're flawed, so they're not going to be perfect every day.
Okay, so that's maybe one.
I think it feels different. I mean, first the trigger feels probably the same.
Yes.
But as you become more aware, then you can, if the same reaction comes from different people, I think after a while we really feel when it comes not putting us down, it's as a lesson. I think this is what they say from the different blocks. And I think then,
Do you think then maybe that initially when you get, it's like a sting, it's like a burn, you feel your ego's been hurt, but did you feel afterwards that there's something of a growth that happens afterwards, whereas as opposed to something that instead a burning sensation where you feel sort of like regret or anger towards that person, which lingers on? Could that be something that lingers? Let's just go down the word really quick. Go ahead, you just go down.
Well, I can't help but think of being with BKS Iyengar, because he was criticized a lot for being so harsh.
Right.
And my experiences with him, he was intense, the Lion of Pune. And so where it came across very strict and sometimes harsh, the after effect would be like you'd be in bliss. He would adjust you, you'd be 100% in the pose. He would tell you what to do, and all of a sudden your whole awareness would expand to a degree you didn't even know it could. So the aftermath made it clear what the intention was.
Good.
I feel like it's a matter of whether you feel like you're being treated with respect or not, because someone can say something extremely critical and it can resonate and you think, oh, it's true, but you're not offended.
Right. It's also how you react.
And it is, you do have to know yourself, but then you, so I think for me that's what it is there still, the criticism is there, but do I feel respected or not respected in the way it was communicated to me? And then I think also people who are generally very respectful can have terrible days and say things that might not be appropriate. And if the person is big enough to come to you and say, hey, sorry for lashing out, but this is really what the issue is.
Right.
That's what I think.
Yeah, very good, very good. Yes.
Sometimes I think we don't see the need for change. And it's up to our readiness.
Right.
Like, even for example in yoga classes, you could hear the same thing for months, and then one time you hear it and it's like, oh yeah, I really need that. This is my time, this is my change. So it also depends on our readiness, right? Because people can send signals, but if we always like in defense in our own bubble, we may not see them positively, but at the end they may actually bring the change.
That's a very good point. Yes, thank you. Yes.
So from my experience, it seems that the reprimand may at first make you feel a humility, but it transforms into being humble. So, and it's something that you learn for positive upliftment, you know, that you had to hear. So, when that reprimand transforms into a humbleness of yourself versus not feeling well about that.
Right. And sometimes these things can take a long time for us to recognize.
I know, like, I feel like when Guruji, he only reprimanded me really strongly once.
Right.
And I hold on to that so much now that he's, you know, in another realm in my practice.
You know, sometimes in the Indian way of thinking, they say these reprimands were actually blessings.
Yeah.
So they're blessings in what way? That they're really helping you, they're dissolving what you think you are into something bigger. You know, the ego-crushing experience can be sometimes very difficult, but, and we don't know really until later, after it takes time to realize what the intent was and how it takes, how it forms in our life. So let's go on the last question because we are way over time. Did you have, I'm sorry, you had
Well,
yes.
Art, I'll give you a quick one. I must have to say this. It was with Mr. Iyengar and heavy reprimand.
Yeah.
In the middle of 108 people, and I was singled out in a blast.
Wow.
And I didn't take it well. So I questioned everything after that and wondered, am I in the right place? What am I doing? Because I thought I was very, as much in as I could be. And it wasn't coming across like he was seeing that. And so I just kind of, like you said, I had to kind of pull back my ego and kind of let it go. 10 years before I saw, like you said, it takes a long time, 10 years of another teacher saying, do you realize, you know, I think you're still kind of holding on to that. I said, I didn't think so. No, it sounds like you are. But do you know what he did for you? I said, no. Well, I think I do. He took the time out of all those people to blast you and attack that ego because he saw something, that something could awaken inside. And I said, I never really looked at it that way.
That's a really good point.
I didn't quite look at it that way. But I think she was right on. But that took 10 years.
That's, remember, this is, love is translated differently in different cultures.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just, love, in this sense, if they're giving you that attention, I'll give you an example. Like, it took me a long time to understand when I was born and raised here, but I grew up in a very traditional Indian environment. And so when I was going to school, you'd see the American parents hugging their children and saying, I love you, and kissing them. The physical affection. As an Indian child, they don't express love. The parents don't express love through these physical gestures. They express love through their actions. So you'll see your parents always making you your food. You know, everything is provided for you. That's how they express their love. And when you get to these higher spiritual teachers, from my own observation, is the attention that they put on you. If they're focusing their attention on you and they're taking the energy to blast you like that, it's because it was necessary. Our egos, I know from my own experiences, are very hardened shells. And sometimes it takes a dynamite blast to open it up, and then we become receptive to something greater. That was not possible, that we couldn't have done by ourselves. It took some outside intervention. And they took the time and the grace because they saw something within us that was willing to accept at that moment. So, yes. Let's go on to the final question because we are running out of time. So, did we get everybody for this second question? Okay. So let's start with you guys with this last question. So question number 3 is, how do your yoga and spiritual practices help you in transforming or improving your relationships? Do they work for you only, or do their effects extend to others? And really, what are your practices?
Okay. So for most of us, obviously, including yoga, and they let one feel centered, confident, less needy, and loving. They connect me to myself and give me fulfillment and detachment. I am able to surrender to the divine.
The practice changes the ambiance around me, so in that way it helps other people. And those practices include the asanas, pranayama, prayer, chanting. Yoga fills up certain tanks within me, like patience and availability. I'm able to engage in self-reflection, detachment, and not get caught up in minor things. It helps me with every part of my life, like even waking up. Teaching yoga helps contribute to everyone's life, and I'm able to share that with everyone. And although I use the I meant the word. Sure.
So, but let me pose a question here then, because I really didn't hear the answer to this.
Oh.
Was that, and this is to everybody, in the yoga practices that we do, and it sounds like we are changing ourselves. So I call this is a clearing my mind, it's making me more alive, more at peace. But is there also an objective change? Meaning, do the people around us, are they changing also due to our internal practices? Yes and no. What are some of your comments?
Yes.
So in what ways?
I believe personally in you teach by example, and the way that yoga has changed me has allowed me to teach by example. I see all of my closest friends and people that I love change in reflection to my changes. Every single one. You know,
You're sure it's not, you're not culling your eyes, it's just not your eyes?
No, I don't think so. I really don't think so. Now, I do think that there are other people that, yes, that the larger world at hand, I think, has changed because I see the larger world differently. I don't think the world has changed around me. But yes, I do think my very, very closest people that I love the most, yes, I think they've changed because I have changed.
Thank you. Let's go on to you guys here.
So whatever practice it is, whether it's yoga, pranayama, daily mantra, it keeps me centered. It reminds me what is important and keeps me grounded. The calmness from yoga resonates out to others. And the important thing was learning detachment. And so when you can detach yourself from something that bothers you, it helps you, but it also affects others around you. And maybe it teaches you that if you can be detached, you can try things without worrying about becoming attached to them.
Wonderful. I think also in this respect, Swami Vivekananda is telling us that you should have that much power of detachment as that of attachment. It's easy to attach to something, to get so focused, but it's really difficult when the time comes to let it go. You know, how many of us get caught up by what we're doing and then we expect to be recognized and for everything, and when we're not recognized or appreciated, we can't let that go. And somebody else takes credit, then we're really boiled up about that. So I think that doing these practices also gives us the power, as you said, of detachment, the ability to detach when necessary. It's under our control. You guys, next.
We talked about how our practice helps us really tune into ourselves and discover parts of ourselves that we can offer to the relationship or to help be seen in the relationship. That our practice helps us to be present and have clarity of mind when we're with somebody. That we teach by example, and that we have a strong sense of intuition and self-awareness that can help us have that detachment.
Right, good point. Thank you. Thanks for
Oh, I guess that's okay. We're switching now.
Sure.
We're switching it up a little bit. Okay, so then, would you say following the yamas? Is that how you say it? Practicing the asanas brings patience and self-discipline, self-reflection, honesty, integrity, sanity. Meditation brings clarity, the ability to be helpful towards others, increases one's own godliness. Brings out one's godliness, ability to share with others, and to share that with others, and to help accept the nature of others.
Another word that pops out that we didn't talk about, self-reflection. How many, just by show of hands, how many of you guys meditate or have a practice of meditation? You are so lucky. You're doing the yoga. The yoga and the meditation work hand in hand. So meditation is a great process just to be able to detach, to observe, and to, without judgment, see, reflect. And I think it's really important just to take even 5 minutes, even if it's just 5 minutes out of the day, to do a daily practice of meditation. And you should be consistent. That's also if you do it like once and then another week, once a week or once a month, it's most effective if you do it every day and you have a regular time when you do it, because then the mind, you develop a conducive spirit when you do it. And I've heard also you should do it someplace if you have in your house, and that part of your house should just be dedicated for meditation or yoga, because it creates a vibration. So every time you walk into that space, the mind automatically settles down and you're ready to go into that meditative space. So it really helps with self-reflection. So, and you guys are the last one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just picked out my meditation spot in my house.
Okay, wonderful.
The practice helps us see things more clearly and to witness it. It's kind of a realization. And people say they practice Raja Yoga, Pranayama, Yoga Asanas. It helped us to try not to be so judgmental, and it helped us let go from our minds, but it's a slow process. It's not fast. And then when we see people responding positively to us, it makes us more centered. And it's kind of like layers, and it improves all our relationships. And people notice a physical sense of well-being. I've noticed my friends, they're attracted to it and they want to know about it, but I can never get them to come. I keep trying.
That's okay.
So that's it.
Well, thank you guys so much for this wonderful experience. Thank you. And maybe you can have spiritual cafes sometime more. It's a really great way to get to know your own community.
Yeah, Deaf Cafe sounds great. And also, 1 second, everyone. We didn't have the tea and snacks inside. I mean, some people did, but there's tea, there's drinks, and there's samosas. So you can have one now. They're just out there.
You have to have a samosa.
Samosa that will help your digestive fire and your relationships. You won't be hungry.